And we're really delighted that you are joining us. So thank you. So first, let me introduce you, Mike, if that's okay. Mike has been in the professional sports marketing and management business for 30 years. He joined the Timbers in 2009 and helped lead the organization during its highly successful launch to Major League Soccer. He also oversees all the business functions for the Timbers, the Portland Thorns, and the Portland Timbers 2, their Tier 2 team. Previously, he served as the Chief Operating Officer of the Portland Trail Blazers, the Executive Vice President of the Memphis Grizzlies of the NBA, Senior Vice President of Business Operations and Chief Marketing Officer for the New York Rangers of the National Hockey League, and he began his career as a producer for Major League Productions. So Michael has quite a wide array of sports involvement and connections. And Michael, let me just turn over to you if there's any opening words you want to share.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you for those on for joining today. It's always great to have an opportunity to talk to members of the community. And so, yeah, I look forward to the conversation. Obviously, it's been a pretty tumultuous time for the sports industry, and I look forward to chatting with you about some of my views on where it's going and how we're going to get there. If you put on one hand the list of industries that were most impacted by COVID, you would have to think that sports and entertainment is on that short list. So it's been tumultuous. There's also been some really good things that come out of it, and I've always believed that sports is such an important part of the fabric of our communities and important part of the national dialogue that we're having. And if you look at all the seminal moments in our history, sports has always been part of the healing and part of bringing people back together. And obviously this is a unique set of circumstances that directly impact that act of getting together. But I do believe sports will continue to be part of the balm that brings us back from not only the pandemic, but obviously the civil and social issues that we're all facing today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, on that note, Mike, I know President Trump several weeks ago brought together all the, CEO or directors of all the major sports leagues, football, baseball, soccer, et cetera, and said, let's bring live sports back to the country. So talk a little bit about the re-entry of sports and the challenges that each organization, each sport is facing in making that happen.
Yeah, it's like all of you who work with your respective organizations. What you believe to be the case 3 weeks ago is so different today, and it's obviously so remarkably fluid. That said, sports has always been on the forefront of technological advances, and so this situation is no different. So I'll back up for a minute. I'm part of a group in Oregon. It's U of O, athletic department, athletic head, OSU, all the Division I athletic programs, the Blazers, the Hops. We're all part of a group that's working together to figure out how we bring sports back to the state of Oregon. That is being overlaid by the work that's being done the National Basketball Association, Major League Soccer, NCAA, Pac-12, and we're all bringing all of our learnings and all of our findings into the discussion as it relates to Oregon. The short answer is we're not sure yet, right? First and foremost, we want to provide a safe, comfortable place for our fans to come back. And we recognize that, it may be a process, right? And so, today as an example, Major League Soccer announced the return of soccer, and it's going to take place in Orlando in a closed environment, meaning no fans, and it's going to be a tournament style, and the NBA is contemplating something very similar. So for sports, at least for soccer and probably the NBA and probably NHL, that's going to be the first entry back, is getting all the athletes and all the critical game personnel and team personnel into a controlled setting where they can be tested on a regular basis, and if found positive, quarantined in the proper way, et cetera, et cetera. So that you see happening in Germany for the last 3 weeks. The Bundesliga, the league in Germany, has been playing in similar conditions now for a month. Korean Baseball League, similar. So I think that will be the first sort of re-entry of professional sports in our country, closed environment. The next phase, and when this happens, is again a open question, and I think you'll see different answers in different parts of the country, but will be in front of reduced capacity, reduced fans. And the restaurant business and movie theater business are all sort of thinking in a similar way. And so we have been working very hard. What does that mean? How many fans can we fit in our stadium, Providence Park, if we've got to maintain certain social distance protocol? And how do we move people in and out in a staggered, organized way? And how do we move people around the building? And how do we feed them? And how do we, and so, so there are a lot of moving parts, but we're beginning to really formulate plans. We're bringing some new technologies to the fore. And, so I do anticipate that, it will be a phasing approach where we may have 20% of our fans attend the first game back, and maybe that evolves up to a greater capacity over time. The governor of Texas announced that they can have up to 50% in venues in Texas. And so I do believe you'll see different answers to that question. I know here with the Timbers, we're thinking more conservatively that it's going to be a more gradual re-entry, and that we think it's likely that the games we play, at least in this calendar year, will be to reduce capacity. And so there'll be an array of protocols and procedures to make sure that we execute that the right way.
So, okay, so Mike, there's a lot of follow-up questions to what you just shared, because there's a lot there and there's a lot of challenges. So let's start with the players. Okay, so let's use Major League Soccer. There are 26 teams are going to descend on Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida to play a tournament. How do you manage the testing? What if one player gets sick? Does that preclude the whole tournament, or is it 5 players have to get, how do they manage that? And then the last question about the players, they're going to be potentially separated from their families in some cases for a period of time. So kind of walk us through the player side.
Yeah, all great questions, Mark. Taking the last question first. Yeah, it's something we're really cognizant of, right? I mean, the players been sequestered already in Portland. We have been training in small groups now for several weeks. And keep in mind, many of our players are from all over the world. So these young kids from every corner of the world, living in a city they're not necessarily used to, the language that's not their first. Bringing them, it's going to be a minimum of 30 days, maximum 45 days. It's not too different than a long road trip or going to the World Cup. But we are definitely cognizant and sensitive to the fact that it's a lot to ask of not just the players, but all the staff that have to go. There's going to be a very controlled environment, separate floors, separate meal rooms, moving around to and from training in a controlled way. And so there's been a lot of really, without sharing all the details, a lot of really smart thinking around obviating as much of the risk as possible. So there's a voluminous document on procedures and protocols. On your first question, Mark, teams have to arrive a week early and be quarantined. They'll be tested every step of the way. If a player does test positive, we pull that player out of the mix right away. And there's a host of procedures that happen. But no, the tournament won't be stopped. And this has actually happened, in Germany, in the Bundesliga, as I mentioned before. So short answer is the league has spent an exhaustive amount of time and brought in national experts on every sort of piece of this, develop, what we think is a very, very well thought out, vigilant protocol that mitigates as much risk as possible and provides as much safety and security for not just the players, but everybody involved in the tournament.
So I'm assuming that the leagues are all talking to one another, the NBA, hockey, etc. So why is baseball having such a challenge in trying to figure out what they're going to do?
Yeah, Mark, for sure. And I'm sure many of the people on have experienced this in their own industries, their own companies. One of the, if there are some silver linings that come out of this pandemic, is that the sharing, the collaboration, the collegiality between teams in our league, teams around sports entities around the state of Oregon has been incredible because we're all kind of in this together. To answer your question about baseball, yeah, they are having a really hard time figuring out their charting their course. Baseballs have always had a very challenging dynamic with their players association. And that's really at the root of their inability, at least thus far, to sort of find a path forward. In our case, we had to go to our players' union and have them agree to the plan I just outlined. And because it is a lot to ask, as you pointed out, it's a lot to ask of the players. And it's just been a challenging dynamic with baseball, figuring out what the players would be willing to do, what salaries they're willing to take to do this. And it's just, unfortunately, it's been a history of baseball having, more challenges on the labor front than perhaps the other leagues have had. I am confident that they'll find a way forward. I just think that everybody on both sides had too much to lose not to have some baseball season this year. And I also think, like, I'm really excited that MLS is going to be the first major league back, because I think we have a shot, just in the same way that the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, really captured so many eyeballs because people are so hungry for sports. I think we have an advantage of being one of the first sports back, and baseball had that opportunity, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. We're going to start playing in early July. Looks like the NBA could start playing in Orlando in late July. It remains to be seen when baseball can get it together. So I'm confident they will, but it's been a very challenging dynamic with their players.
I'm just curious, what would happen if a player on the Timbers said, "I don't feel safe, I don't want to go, and I'm not going to play"? How does the team respond?
Yeah, listen, it's, players are our biggest asset. They're our talent. They're our product. And we have developed, and what makes a team successful is this trust and this bond and this ethos in the locker room that translates on the field. And that, when that's healthy, which has always been our case, that pre-exists the pandemic. There are some players who who have pre-existing conditions and some risk that others might not, that obviously teams will be respectful of. But, part of the debate with the players was addressing their concerns. And, and so we collectively bargained with the Players Association to address those concerns and made a lot of changes. And so we believe, by virtue of that, players are, in addition to obviously being contractually obligated to, I think our process has yielded a plan that, as far as I know, every player is comfortable with pursuing.
Okay. There was a report today in Bleacher Report that there might be a group of NBA players who are not really fans of this new Orlando restart plan. I don't know if you've heard anything about it or any thoughts about it.
Yeah, listen, it's such a different paradigm, and it's such a unique set of circumstances. And I so respect, not just in the context of sports and players, people's views on the matter. Everybody has a very, very intensely personal way of dealing with, what this has all presented to us. And so I'm deeply respectful, particularly when, particularly athletes who, have short careers and short windows. I respect their voice. I not knowing exactly what the concerns are, it's hard to comment. But I think, listen, we experienced some of that too. And it's healthy. And I think in our case, it got to a better plan. And we're also dealing with the same thing on the women's side, the NWSL, where the Thorns play. And so, again, I don't know all the details, and I don't know what they said, but I'm respectful of their views, and I hope when the NBA, refines and resolves their ultimate plan, I think you'll see a lot of the concerns be addressed, and maybe some of the concerns that were expressed today addressed and mitigated. You're
Great.
tough, Mark.
So let's turn to the fan side of all of this. You talked to the Timbers Army is a rabid fan base who wants to be there and singing loudly and waving flags, etc. Talk a little bit about what you mentioned earlier. If we got, instead of a full stadium, you have a third of the stadium full. Who gets to go to a game if I have season tickets? How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, it is an issue we've been talking about, and a good problem to have in a certain sense. We've thought about this a lot. We've had a lot of conversations directly with our season ticket holders. We're going to be doing some more research to find out comfort level and things of thinking about. But if you were to assume that we would be operating in a limited capacity in the fall, we've sold out every game we've ever played, 25,000 fans a game, and if we have to limit it to 4,000 or 5,000, we'll have some tough decisions to make. There's a number of sort of models we're looking at. Is there a lottery? Is there, Mark, if you're a season ticket holder, you would be able to choose 5 games that work best for you. So I think there are a lot of ways to be equitable to address the finite supply and excess demand, and that would be the plan. Is find a fair model where fans can choose the games that work for them, and I do think people are going to be understanding that this is a new world, and they're going to adapt to new ways of doing things. They're already seeing that in so many parts of our daily lives, and so I think if we ask fans, hey, listen, due to capacity constraints, we're instead of coming to every game, you're going to get a chance to come to 4. I think we're going to get a really high degree of understanding and cooperation.
I hope so. Until I can't get to go to the game. That's when people get upset, when it's not their turn. The first 2 sports that that came back was professional wrestling and Ultimate Fighting Championship. They were the first 2, and neither has fans. And some said that Ultimate Fighting Championship is more interesting with no fans because you can hear everything in the arena, you can hear the hits, you can hear whatever. Soccer is a whole different story where the players feed off the energy of the fans. What has the Bundesliga learned so far with not having fans in the stands?
It's interesting, Mark. It's a good observation. It is so much a part of the experience of all sports, but particularly soccer. It really defines the experience. And interesting, the Bundesliga, a couple of interesting findings. One is there historically had been a very strong home field advantage. Soccer has among the highest home field advantages in sports. Basketball has a high home field advantage. Baseball, one of the lower ones, interestingly. But soccer is very high one, and the Timbers have a very high one too, based on the rabidity of our fans and the atmosphere that the players, like you say, completely feed off of. So the winning percentage of home teams during the Bundesliga's first few weeks has dropped precipitously. So not surprising. And then it's been interesting to see some of the innovations that sports has tried. The Bundesliga, for example, the first couple of weeks just had audio that was coming from the field, and it was you could hear players, and that was cool in certain respects. The next few weeks they took previously recorded games, crowd noise, and overlaid that for the television audience. And some fans loved that because it gave a sense of a real game. Other fans didn't like it because they knew it wasn't real. In Korean Baseball League, they had cutout fans. You were able to sort of put your own figure into the stand and populate the stands with cutout figures. I think in one stadium they ordered something and there were blow up textiles inadvertently that they put in stands. There was a Dutch soccer team that put a giant Zoom call up on the scoreboard, so fans were watching the game from their home, but up on a Zoom call and reacting. There's an app that I guess is in test phase in Japan where you can hold your phone up and react to what's happening, and that reaction gets piped into the stadium. And so it's just a taste of some of the things that you will see that Again, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, sports has always been sort of a laboratory for innovation, and I think COVID will accelerate that. And I think you'll see new things on how we interact and how we move around and how we experience venues that emanate from the sports industry.
Yeah, you know, it's all about the fan experience. And I know the National Hockey League is talking about miking more players during the game, so you can hear them. You know, I'm sure they'll be on some sort of time delay, but you'll be able to hear what they have to say to each other. You know, I know in Atlanta, the new football stadium, you know, has these sensory seats when you're sitting there, so you can feel the rumble and all of those kind of things. So let's talk about live TV sports. You said the word earlier about pressure. So I'm just curious, is the pressure on the players to play, on the owners to put people out on the team? Is it the fans putting pressure on, we want to watch games? Or what about TV contracts and the pressure that the TV networks are putting on teams to say, we need live sports?
Yeah, you know, it's all those things, Mark. And I wouldn't say it's pressure, right? Nobody wants to be rash, and nobody in our industry wants to do anything that puts athletes or fans or anybody else in a bad way. But to your point, you're absolutely right. A big economic driver in our industry is broadcast, and in varying amounts and varying degrees, national television deals and local television deals, very much in a very important variable in the financial equation, to be sure. And so you see in England right now, a big reason why the EPL is coming back is to realize the value of their broadcast relationship they have with Sky Sports. So yeah, it is a variable, and you know, one of the positive byproducts of being able to stage the games in Orlando for us and for the NBA is that, you know, we're delivering part of our obligations to, in our case, ESPN and Fox. So absolutely, it is an important part of what makes the sports industry tick. It's what helps pay the players and et cetera, et cetera. So 100%. But it's, at least from my vantage point, the networks aren't putting any undue pressure on the properties to do anything that they're not ready to do. Are they hungry for live sports? Oh, yeah, 100%. That's why you see cornhole and you know, dog eating contests and all the things you mentioned, because it's we're all, no pun intended, hungry for sports again. And so yeah, they're eager to have live sports product back on their air, to be sure. But you know, if and when the leagues are ready, and I think you'll see that start to happen with our tournament in early July.
So let's talk about the financial side. You mentioned how much TV contracts play a role in the financial side, but you know, the impact on the teams because of COVID-19, from the employees, the players, the vendors, the nearby businesses. Talk a little bit about that economic impact, and you know, how long, maybe make a guess at when it might come back in your minds to get back to, you know, full stadiums, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a big ecosystem. You know, it's not only the people we directly employ, but it's all the vendors and the, you know, and the part-time staff who work games. We have, you know, nearly 1,000 part-time workers who work games, and it's a big ecosystem. And then, you know, if there's a Timbers game, people descend onto downtown and spend money in restaurants and stores and parking, and so it's a big economic impact. And not having any games and no attendant revenues has been really hard for us. You know, I think one of the things that I'm proud of, and I think it has helped us make some really good decisions along the way, is that from day one, we've always been about building something that's enduring and lasting, and we've always had a long-term purview, and that's, it's a luxury to be able to have that, understand that. But even in this environment, with all the consequences I just talked about, and all the near-term pressures that the pandemic has caused us, we're still very much operating through that prism of we're going to do the right thing because we're in this relationship with our fans and the community for the long term. We're not going to make any decisions. We're going to try not to make decisions that that affect that. And so, is this a devastating year for the sports industry? Absolutely. But we believe that who knows how long it's going to take and at what pace, but we believe that we'll bounce back real strong, and we're going to keep putting ourselves in position to be ready when that happens.
Okay. Somebody asked a question in the chat about the loss of revenue due to COVID-19. Do you think that future sports contracts are going to add provisions about if there's a pandemic where sponsors get less, players get less, the endorsement deals are less? Do you think that will now be built into the lexicon?
Yeah, it's a great question. Interestingly, it's been written about, but the NBA in their collective bargaining agreement has a force majeure provision. So the NBA, by virtue of that, has the ability to enact certain things that they otherwise couldn't, as it relates to players' salaries, et cetera. Part of the things we worked through as a league, we hadn't had that. We were actually just had agreed on a deal that hadn't been ratified, so we were able to introduce that into our agreement with the players. But yeah, I think and in some of our sponsorship deals, we have those kind of provisions, and some we don't. But yeah, I think any business worth its salt is going to, who knows what the next, existential crisis is going to be. But I think any business has to now, sort of structure their relationships in a new way by what we've all been through and what we've learned. And I think sports is no different.
Okay. Curious, you're not here to speak for the Trailblazers. So, but, when the NBA had their vote about coming back, it was a, 29-1 vote, and only the Trailblazers voted against the current plan, primarily due to the playoff format, et cetera. Are you surprised that it wasn't unanimous, or, would you be surprised if in MLS there was some outliers in whatever decisions were made?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of transparency into that and what their objectives were. I'd say this. It's such new territory for all of us, and it's so fraught with issues. And Mark, you've gotten at so many of them in your questions and insights. It's so unprecedented in so many ways. And I can tell you this, in our circles, around the board room in our leagues, there was a lot of debate and a lot of different views and dissents on different issues, and that's totally to be expected, right? I mean, we're charting a path that's a completely new set of circumstances. And so I am not surprised there was dissent, not surprised there were divergent opinions. Frankly, it's healthy. I think, at least in the case of MLS and NWSL, I think that got us to a better place and ultimately a better decision. So I'm sanguine about it, Mark. And again, I don't want to suppose anything because I don't know, all the circumstances around their vote and the discussion. But I can tell you that in our context, that was healthy, and I do think it yielded a better set of solutions in the end.
So I'm just curious, a little background about you. Where are you from originally, and how'd you get involved in sports management?
New Yorker, originally born in Queens, grew up south of the city, and just always been in my family's DNA, sports. My mom grew up near the Polo Grounds where the New York Giants play. My dad grew up near Ebbets Field and kind of set the tone for the relationship of the marriage. Very healthy and a long-standing marriage, but spicy. And we it's always been part of my sort of family culture. And I never really thought about it as a business until kind of my senior year in college. I kind of went liberal arts direction, And then, with some great mentors, the light kind of went on, and hey, maybe I could make a career out of something that I just eat, breathe, inhale, and haven't really turned back. But for one summer at Apple Computer, between years at business school, I've been in one part of the sports industry or another, really since college. And it's not without its challenges and its vagaries, but it is a damn fun business to be able to be in. And what I love about it, in the end, is just what the role sports plays. There are very few places that are so egalitarian and so inviting and so inclusive, where young and old and black and white and rich and poor can have a shared experience. Really very few entities in sort of contemporary society that can say that. And sports, when done right, is such a big community builder. And I like to think that we've done that pretty well with the Timbers and Thorns. And so it's just really fun to do something that people enjoy, that, if we've done our job well, it brings people together. They put their troubles aside, they put their phones down for a couple hours, they hug strangers after a goal, and it's diversion entertainment at its best when it works. And so, yeah, it's been a really, really fun career. Love to be able to do it. One of the challenges I faced in my career is that, it's a crazy career, and often opportunities come in different cities, and you can't always control where you are. And the fact that I've been able to apply my craft in a city I love for as long as I have has been such a privilege. And so I've been working with the Blazers and now here. I love this community. It's such an amazing place. Sports has always been, such a big part of the vernacular in Portland and the state of Oregon, and to be part of that conversation has been a real privilege.
So, you've worked with baseball, you've worked with hockey, you've worked with basketball, you've worked with soccer. Is it about the sport, or is it about what the job is when you make those kind of career decisions?
A bit of both. I think there's some very strong parallels in any successful sports organization, and that is, or especially on the team side, and that is community building, right? The Blazers have done this really well for 40 years. I like to think we've done it well for our decade in existence. It's about community building, and it's about getting people together and creating a good experience. And you mentioned that earlier, Mark. It's about the fan experience, and so that is a common imperative across any sports team. It's bringing people together and providing a safe, fun, interactive, engaging experience for them. Are there nuances from sport to sport? Absolutely. Are there differences in the fan base, in the sport, and the culture of the sport? In our case, the fact that we're so global makes us really unique. Sport of soccer is played in every country around the world, and it's the sport in all but a couple countries in every corner of the world. And that is really unique, the global nature of our sport. It is unique how fan-driven the game environment is. So yeah, there's some unique aspects of each sport for sure. The player development side's different from sport to sport, but the crux of a successful sports team, I think is very similar. I helped, start an NBA team in Memphis. The parallels of sort of launching a team there, an NBA team in Memphis, Tennessee, there are a lot of strong parallels to what we did with the Timbers and Thorns. But in the end, I think any sports team that really resonates in a really meaningful way, in the end, really reflects its community. And I think so being a Timbers fan and being a Blazers fan really is distinctly different than being a fan of the Indiana Pacers, the Milwaukee Bucks, or the LA Galaxy. And so when we're really clicking and we're really doing our job right, we're truly a reflection of our community and our state in how we exist in our community. And I think I like to think at least that we've done a nice job of that with the Timbers and Thorns.
So let's reflect on that for a second. You talk about, being, part of this community in the state. Talk about, if you could share, what's going on in our community, actually across the country, with racial tensions, et cetera, where the Timber stands, what the thinking is, the mindset, how do we bring this community together? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we could spend hours on it. And again, I think any organization is asking those questions of themselves. Sports has always been on the vanguard of social issues, from Jackie Robinson, the first African American professional athlete, to the Mexico City Olympics, and I could go on and on and on where sports has been on the tip of the debate of social issues of any kind, and certainly on social justice and race relations. And it's no different today in the midst of what we're all dealing with. NASCAR coming out today on the position of banning the Confederate flag, and Colin Kaepernick has been a pioneer in the debate we're having today. And so, all that said, I think sports will continue to be very much on the forefront of the ongoing discussion, debate, and we feel that as a sports team in this community that we should be part of that, and have been even before the George Floyd incident and subsequent protests. And so we take that role really seriously, and feel that if we are good stewards of what we do, that we can be a positive influence in the dialogue and the solutions that we hopefully will emerge from this.
Let's talk about gender equity in sports. The women's soccer team, went to filed a lawsuit to have equal pay to the men, et cetera. Talk a little bit about that, and also talk about the National Women's Soccer League and where that is and its future viability.
Yeah, Mark, on the first part, I'll refrain from giving a lot on that because it's still a pending case. That said, we would so believe in what the women athletes are doing to lead the debate on gender equity. And gosh, we are so proud of what we've built here with the Thorns. It's just been amazing. We've averaged more than 20,000 fans a game, and there's no women's sports team of any kind in the world that's doing what we're doing. And we believe that by the support that we've received from our fans and the amazing athletes who put on the Thorns jersey, that we can be we are part of the debate. And it's a really, really challenging balancing act, because would we like to pay the Thorns what the Timbers are making? Well, we love that, and we've been working really hard to increase the pay. But ultimately, the best legacy we can give is a viable women's sports league that can over time continue to exist and continue to provide opportunities for our best athletes. And and Major League Soccer players don't make what NBA players make, because the league is in a different part of its evolution, and WNBA players don't make what NBA players make. But we're all really working hard to kind of get to that point over time. So again, we could spend hours on this topic, and it's one we're very passionate about. I'll just say this, Mark. We so proud of what we've done with the Thorns. We believe we're a leader in women's sports, at least on the team level, anywhere in the world. And whenever there is a debate internationally, the Thorns are always part of the mix. And we take that mantle of leadership in women's sports really seriously, and are trying to apply it in the most positive way we can.
Great. Who was your favorite athlete growing up?
I was a huge Mets fan. There was a shortstop, Bud Harrelson, number 3, who was a scrappy, great fielder, scrappy speedster, kind of a slap hitter, but maybe the people my age out there might remember Pete Rose went in real hard one day and they got in a fight. I just loved him. I was just a huge Mets fan. So I would say him. Walt Frazier on the Mets was a favorite. I did some work with him when I was at the Rangers. He was announcing for the Knicks. He still is, as we got to know each other pretty well. He was just incredibly creative point guard for the Knicks for many years. Just a distinct style. So he was up there. Raj Gobert was a player for the Rangers who, as it turns out, when I was running the Rangers business, was on my staff. And to be able to have a guy whose poster was up in my room be a colleague was like, this is kind of cool. But yeah, I still have a place in the heart for my New York teams. But it's hard not to root for your hometown team. So I root for the Knicks unless they're playing the Blazers.
So, I'll just share. I know there's a lot of people on the call who probably don't want to hear the story, but I grew up in Orlando, Florida. That's where I'm from. And we were one of the first cities in America to get cable TV to the full extent that you could get cable TV. So I grew up a New York Rangers fan. Nobody in my family knew anything about hockey, but Madison Square Garden Network was on our cable channels. And so when Barry Beck and the Maloney brothers and Ron Duguay, that was my team. So that was my childhood. I can hear my grandmother in my head asking me, so who's your favorite Jewish athlete?
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to Mets. There was a first baseman, a big lumbering, left-handed hitting first baseman, Ed Kranepool. Again, I'm dating myself. This is when I was a kid. But Ed, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up. I loved Ed Kranepool. He's not Jewish. There was a player, Art Shamsky, who was also a first baseman, right fielder, left-handed hitting, who I loved. So yeah, probably that. How about you, Mark?
My favorite Jewish athlete? That's a good question. I'm going to come back to it in a second. I'm going to think about it. So, look, if I told you who it was, it'd be embarrassing. His name was Barry Horowitz. Nobody would know him, but he was a professional wrestler who was there to lose all the time. And I actually met him and knew him quite well, and he always was very, very, very proud of his Jewishness. So that was my favorite Jewish athlete.
Barry,
but not in one of the major sports. Yeah. So exactly. It's Pride Month across the country, and the Timbers and the Thorns have been tremendous supporters of the LGBTQ community. Can you share a little bit about it? Because this Friday, I'm going to do a little commercial. This Friday night, we're doing a Unity Shabbat candle lighting in honor of Pride Month. But talk a little about the Timbers and the Thorns and their outreach to the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, it's been a big part of who we are from the start, and we have a number of really great ongoing initiatives with the LGBTQ community and some special ones for the month. It's interesting. We were approached by Basic Rights Oregon about a year before marriage equality was on our statewide ballot. And the late Nick Fish had called me up and said, hey, would you meet with Basic Rights? And our owner, Merritt Paulson, and I had lunch with Nick and the head of Basic Rights. And they asked us, would you guys, with the Timbers, this was actually predates the Thorns, would you guys come out and support marriage equality in Oregon? And no sports team anywhere had at that point done that. And on the ride back from lunch at the Heathman, Merritt and I talked about it, and he said, what do you think? I said, if you want to do it, we should do it. It's the right thing to do. And so that next morning we did. And so, and it was, again, and now it seems passé because it's, but anyway, we are a mirror to our community, and it's been a very, very important cause to us and to our fans, and will continue to be. And so we are proud of what we're doing around Pride, both this month, but also on an ongoing basis, Mark.
Thank you. No, it's terrific. So the soccer season's going to kick back into gear at some level. Are we going to bring home the MLS Cup this year?
Well, your lips, right? It was really good this year, and we really thought going into this year that we had a good shot at returning to Cup. Some of the fans on might remember we won in 2015. We went to the finals in 2018, and so it's time again for us to get back there. But one of the great things about soccer, and I think the NFL's this way too. There's always debate in sports. Is parity a good thing, or having dominant teams a good thing? And there's arguments to be made on both sides of that. But I like the fact that with MLS, anybody could win not anybody could win the cup, and you don't find that in other soccer leagues around the world, and you probably don't find that in other domestic leagues we have here. And so we're good. And but this is a strange season, and we're actually one of the challenges we have one of the more veteran older teams in the league. And does this layoff positively impact us because guys have less mileage on the legs? Does it adversely affect us because the guys are going to have a hard time getting up? Who knows, right? So this is such an anomaly of a year that who knows? But let's hope, Mark.
Well, we're all hoping. We'll cheer you on for sure. Do you think the MLS is going to continue to expand? Is that the goal, or is it kind of hit its peak?
Yeah, we're 26 teams now. We'll be 28 next year with Sacramento and Charlotte coming on, and then we'll be 30. Sacramento and Austin coming on next year, and then Charlotte and St. Louis coming on the year after that. So that'll bring us to 30. NBA's 32, NFL's 32. There's no shortage of markets that want to be in, but that'll be sort of a pause point, at least in the short term, of 30 teams. Expansion has been remarkably successful. We were team 18 10 years ago, and now we're 30 teams, and the new teams that have come on are thriving. Atlanta's averaging 45, 50,000 fans a game, and Cincinnati's averaging 30. And it's just been remarkable to see this league grow. And I think it reflects, we haven't talked much about this, it definitely reflects the changing nature of sport fandom in our country. Several years ago, for the first time, soccer was more popular with kids under 16 than baseball. We average more fans a game than the NBA or NHL does, now going 5 years. Granted, it's less games per year. The nature of our audience, we're more multicultural than any of the major sports. We're more female than any of the major sports. We're younger, more digitally native than other sports. So when you look at the evolving demographics in our country, how it resonates with young people, the global nature of our game, the digital proclivity of our fan base, et cetera, soccer is so well poised. And that's I think why you've seen this sort of exponential growth of soccer in our country, and that's manifesting in franchises like us, but then some of the new franchises I mentioned. So I've always said if sports were stocks, you would be buying up soccer, maybe shorting some of the more traditional sports.
Look, you talk about the growth of soccer. There was an argument on ESPN the other morning if hockey is still one of the big four sports, and instead has been replaced by soccer in America. And, soccer certainly has not only the kids playing it, but the growth of the league certainly shows the value of soccer in this country.
So I'll ask the audience, you guys can use the chat room. I'll ask this question I like to ask folks. So in the 60s, so call it 2 generations ago, there were 3 major sports. And when I say dominant sports, and when I say dominant, the metrics you look at with television audience, mind share, media coverage, etc. There were 3 major sports in the 60s. What were they? So Mark, should we go to the chat room for this?
Sure. So people can go, wait, Rachel, can they go to the chat? Is that okay?
So you provide your guesses of what the three dominant sports in the 60s were.
All right, so I'm asking
Chat
Rachel
has been
to
turned
turn on
on.
the chat.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so give it a try. Let's see what people come up with.
Little quiz show for the.
Okay. We've got baseball, football, basketball. We've got people saying boxing was one of those. Hockey, baseball, basketball, baseball and boxing, and maybe football. Golf was one of them. Baseball, basketball, football. A lot of baseball, hockey, football, baseball, football, hockey. So,
Not
all right,
not
so
not
baseball
cornhole.
certainly is one. Not cornhole, no. Nor
Um,
dodgeball.
Well, you
Oh,
have
horse racing. Somebody put horse racing.
who said that?
Howard Tobin mentioned baseball, football, and horse racing.
All right, Howard, you get the prize. Get my contact information from Mark. I'd love to have you at a Timbers game when we're able to have you. So it's really interesting. The answer is baseball, boxing. So many of you, or several of you at least, recognize that, and horse racing. Horse racing was like the event, the destination viewing every Saturday, as was boxing, and boxing has become a much more niche sport now. The big title bouts get a lot of attention, but on an ongoing basis, it's really not a big part of the vernacular. Horse racing, kind of similar. Football wasn't big. Basketball, when basketball finals were on tape delay as late as the late 70s, which is shocking, right? And so, all that said is, things change, and not dramatically fast but you see the trends, and I do think soccer could very well be, the answer to that question, 10, 15, 20 years from now, because of all the things we've talked about today. And so, because we're just really well positioned, it's a beautiful game that any shape and size can play. It appeals to women as readily as men, and obviously all the global aspects of it that I've discussed. So anyway, thanks for the great answers, and Howard, seriously, reach out to me. I'd love to have you. And
we'll connect you. We'll make the connection. Howard, I promise you, we'll connect you. That's great. Oh, well, Mike, listen, thank you very much for your time, for your insights and everything. And I also wanted to say thank you to the Timbers and the Thorns for really being a model professional sports organization, for your community involvement, for the way you run the operation, and the success you've had on the field. So really kudos to you and the whole team there.
It's very kind of you to say, Mark. We're so proud to be part of this community, and really, really appreciate the chance to have a chat with you. And you're a good interviewer, Mark. If you want to come and analyze Timbers games on air, the job is yours. Howard can run the business for me, can have my job. You can have a broadcasting job, and then I can go on vacation. But anyway, thank you for taking part on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm sure there's a lot of familiar faces on. I don't see everybody who's on, but really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
We are grateful to you too, Mike. Thank you very much, and Howard will connect you. All right, thank you.